Come on, Whiskey, let's go out to the shop. So today's project is to continue on the quilt ladder. A text message from the wife. She says to get the charging cables off the counter. So, project interrupted. We're now making an iPhone charging station. So the task here is to make the counter look like this. Here we go. I'm starting this project with a block of styrofoam, and what I want to use this for is to kind of get me a perspective on how high the shelf should be, how deep it should be, and how wide it should be. This is approximately the thickness that I'm going to want, and I've got an outlet up here that I'm going to be using. So you can see I've got some tape marks on the wall already. I've been looking at this, and right now my thoughts are that I'll have it right at this height, and it's going to be a little shorter than this. It doesn't need to be that big for holding, a Kindle or a cell phone and so on. Depth, that's to be determined, but this is not a bad depth, I don't think. It's just because I'm going to be using an aluminum cleat in order to mount this to the wall. So what I'm looking at is this kind of a mounting space right here. That'll be for the support cleat. Old hickory, a plank left over from an old project. It's a fair-sized plank, and it may just be enough to do this shelf project. The hickory plank is rough on both edges, and it's about 6 inches wide. For the shelf, I'm going to want a plank of about 9.5 inches. So I cut 2 pieces out of the plank at about 24 inches each, and then I'll run those through the jointer. After the jointer process, I'll glue and clamp them, creating the blank that I'll need for the shelf. Gluing and clamping is quick enough, but then I've got to set it aside and let it dry for at least a couple of hours. More is better. And now the magic of the drum sander. Just about every project piece makes a pass through the machine, and the outfeed is a surface that is flat and uniform. Certainly not the only sanding, or the last of the sanding, but a satisfying first pass. So this is the countertop, and I'm going to just cut it to a rough length. Even though this is just a simple shelf, there are a few details for mounting and for aesthetics that I've got to take care of. And the one I'm working on right now is the mount for the back. To mount this against the wall, I'm using this cleat. So this piece will mount against the wall, and this piece will mount against the shelf. And when I set it up against the wall, then it'll engage like that and hold in place. What I want to do is I want to have this piece kind of hidden. If you're looking down from the little shelf, I don't want it to show. And I also want kind of a shadow line at the end, so I don't have just the flat surface of the top shelf against the wall. I want it to have a radius and then a little spacer, and then that'll mount against the wall. So that's what I'm working on now. So on this little sketch, this represents the top of the shelf. and this is where the mounting cleat is going to set. And I'm going to make a little piece that's going to go against the wall, and it'll give me a place to mount the mounting cleat itself, and a little shadow line that I'm after here between the edge of the shelf and the wall. And so that in order to keep some strength to this, what I'm going to do is rabbet cut the shelf itself in order to keep as much material as I can on this little bracket that'll hold the cleat. So my next cut will be this little notch on the back of the shelf. So I've got the shelf coming up towards the wall, a little round over. It'll come down about 3/8 of an inch, and then I'll have about a 3/8 of an inch shadow line, and then this will inset. After that's done, then I'm going to cut this relief out here, which is roughly 0.4 inches, and that'll contain the cleat material. Now I'll run the cleat through the table saw for its final width. And then a pass across the jointer. Earlier, when showing my plan sketch, I described a rabbet for the metal mounting cleat. In fact, I'm actually milling out a pocket. This will be just longer and wider than the cleat itself, and it'll be to a depth of 0.4 inches. Because of access to a mill, that's the machine I'm using. The mill is fun to use and far more accurate than any woodworking project needs to be. I had initially settled on attaching the cleat mount to the shelf with 1/4-inch dowels. Here I'm match drilling holes to pin the two pieces together. The charging shelf needs a drawer for cables and such. There are lots of ways to do this, but I happened to think of an old Kennedy toolbox in the shed. It hadn't been used in 25 years. Time to be repurposed. An advantage of using a drawer from the toolbox is the sheet metal construction and full extension drawer slides. And there's a little nostalgia. The challenge was getting the drawer slides out. They were spot welded into the box slides, and those welds didn't want to give up. So, out comes a cutoff wheel. With one set of guides finally removed, I used a drill press to drill out the welds. Now I need a frame to mount the drawer to the bottom of the shelf. The frame will be fabricated from scrap aluminum. The first cut is a shallow channel that matches the drawer guide dimensions to keep it straight and true when it's fastened to the sides. Next, I tap for 632 mounting holes. The corners are secured with 2 machine screws each. I installed the screws while the frame was still locked in the mill. When the frame comes off the mill, it will be more than square enough for the hickory shelf. Okay, well, I finished fabricating a little box that'll contain the drawer slides, and now it's time to take it out and do a quick fit into the drawer itself. Okay, so this frame will sit into the shelf this way, and these will mount against the bottom of the shelf. So we'll try to see how the drawers fit in here now. Okay, so that will be the way it works. When I mount this drawer, I don't want these ends of these aluminum supports to show, so now I'm going to cut these at a 45 so I can miter a little piece of face trim at 45, and that'll cover the face of this frame. So that's next. Now I want a vise that I can turn to 45 degrees. explore the knee a little bit. With a couple quick passes, the miter is cut. Okay, now it's time to mock this up. See how the drawer box fits. All right, we'll flip it over. And there we have the drawer. So, next step is to double up the thickness on this shelf, bring it out to about 1.5 inches. Shop life with a shop helper. And whiskey is always a shop helper, especially when there might be a treat in it for him. I'm down to final sanding. Okay, almost final sanding. Because on a woodworking project, when you're done sanding, you'll always find a spot that could use a little bit more. Maybe everything could use a pass with an even finer paper. The end grain on the shelf will be doubled up with scrap pieces of hickory that had been trimmed off earlier. It will definitely be worth getting out the track saw to trim these end grain doublers, as it makes such a clean cut. Then a pass through the drum sander against the bottom side of the shelf for a uniform thickness. And here it is, ready to spray. Then final assembly and install. Here's a view from the bottom, and a view from the top. Maybe a little more sanding. Applying a polyurethane finish was always my least favorite process. That is, until I started spraying. This makes it fast and uniform. The cleanup process is no greater than cleaning a brush. Anymore, I don't think I would ever choose to use a brush. I used a rattle can to paint the drawer. The color is kind of a primer red. It reminded me of the red grains in hickory. This will be the last coat. Like so many tasks, it's hard to decide that it's done and then just leave it. Electric is always easy, except when it's not. I wanted an outlet that had built-in charging ports. I looked at several brands that had both USB-A and USB-C. I settled on the Levitron, which was rated at 30 watts of power. Enough for the small devices that I'll be charging. As a side note, if you haven't tried the new Wago connectors for outlets, you're missing out on one of the new wonders of home maintenance. Well, it's time for final assembly of this little shelf, and there really isn't much to it because it is just a shelf. So the first thing I want to do is put the little back mounting plate on. Of course, the back plate has the cleat mount that's been recessed into it. And it just holds on with 3 flathead 1/4-20 screws. So I've got the 3 screws, and I'm using square nuts. So inside the shelf is a little pocket that holds the 1/4-20 nut, and these are square nuts, so the idea is that they can sit on the bottom of this little pocket and they won't spin. So to get that started. Okay. And next is the drawer frame assembly, and that is this piece. And in here I've got some little machine screw inserts. These are for 1022 threads. And this is pocketed out just to help align, keep everything square. So this assembly just drops down into those pockets. And then the 2 flathead 1024 screws. Okay, and then the last thing on assembly is putting the drawer in. And the drawer just slides into these little full extension guides. So, should just drop right in place. There's a couple little detents in those. And that's it. That's the drawer. And the shelf is ready to take in and install it permanently. On installing the shelf to the wall, I expected some fiddling to get it to engage. When it just dropped into place, I was a little bit surprised. So I gave it a little extra push or two, expecting a click or a hard stop. But it mated shelf to wall. Done. One last thing I did was to buy some really short charging cables. The long ones were always a tangle. Well, that's about it. Don't get up, Whiskey. Well, this project is done. I should probably send a return text.